Question 1. An internal audit of a multinational logistics firm operating under ISO 28000-2007 revealed a recurring nonconformity where high-value goods were being dispatched without the required dual authentication security seals being properly affixed and verified by the designated security officer at multiple transit points. The audit report indicated that the primary contributing factor was an inconsistent interpretation of the security protocol among different shift supervisors and a lack of readily accessible reference materials at the point of dispatch. To address this, what would be the most appropriate and comprehensive element to include in the corrective action plan to ensure long-term compliance and prevent recurrence? Option A. Issue a formal warning to all personnel involved in the dispatch process and reinforce the existing security seal application procedure through a one-time team briefing. Option B. Update the supply chain security policy to explicitly state the consequences of noncompliance with security seal procedures and rely on existing supervisory oversight to ensure adherence. Option C. Introduce a penalty system for any deviation from the security seal protocol and reassign supervisors to different operational areas to improve accountability. Option D. Implement a mandatory digital sign-off for each security seal application, linked to a revised training module accessible via mobile devices, and conduct follow-up audits within 3 months to verify adherence. Correct answer is D. Implement a mandatory digital sign-off for each security seal application, linked to a revised training module accessible via mobile devices, and conduct follow-up audits within 3 months to verify adherence. Explanation: the core of developing an effective corrective action plan following an internal audit finding under ISO 28000-2007 lies in addressing the root cause of the nonconformity and preventing recurrence. When an internal auditor identifies a deficiency, such as a failure to consistently verify the security credentials of third-party logistics providers involved in international transit, the corrective action plan must go beyond simply restating the requirement. It needs to detail specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART actions. The plan should outline the systemic issue that allowed the nonconformity to occur. For instance, if the issue was a lack of clear responsibility or inadequate training, the plan would include steps like updating job descriptions, developing a new training module on vetting procedures, and assigning a specific individual to oversee compliance with the vetting process. It must also include a method for verifying the effectiveness of the implemented actions. This verification step is crucial for demonstrating that the root cause has been addressed and that the supply chain security management system is improving. A plan that focuses solely on immediate fixes without investigating the underlying reasons for the failure, or one that proposes actions that are not clearly defined or measurable, would be considered incomplete and ineffective according to the principles of ISO 28000-2007. The plan must also consider the potential impact on other parts of the supply chain security system and ensure that the corrective actions do not introduce new risks. Question 2. During an internal audit of a global logistics firm's supply chain security management system, an auditor is reviewing the documented risk assessment process for inbound shipments of high-value electronics. The firm has identified several potential threats, including theft during transit and tampering at intermediate staging points. The auditor finds that the risk assessment methodology primarily focuses on the monetary value of the goods and the historical frequency of incidents, but does not adequately consider the potential for insider threats at their own distribution centers or the impact of emerging cyber-physical vulnerabilities on cargo tracking systems. Which of the following would represent the most significant deficiency in the firm's risk assessment process according to ISO 28000-2007 principles? Option A. Overemphasis on the monetary value of goods being transported, neglecting the potential for minor losses to accumulate over time. Option B. Failure to integrate analysis of emerging technological vulnerabilities and internal human factors into the risk evaluation. Option C. Insufficient consideration of the historical frequency of reported incidents, leading to an underestimation of potential risks. Option D. Exclusion of external regulatory compliance requirements from the risk assessment framework, focusing solely on operational security. The correct answer is B. Failure to integrate analysis of emerging technological vulnerabilities and internal human factors into the risk evaluation. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 28000-2007 concerning risk assessment is to identify, analyze, and evaluate potential threats and vulnerabilities that could impact the security of the supply chain. This process involves understanding the likelihood of a threat occurring and the potential impact if it does. The standard emphasizes a systematic approach to risk management, which includes not only identifying risks but also determining their significance and then implementing appropriate controls to mitigate them. This involves considering various factors such as the nature of the goods transported, the routes taken, the entities involved, e.g., carriers, handlers, and the regulatory environment. The goal is to reduce the residual risk to an acceptable level. When an internal auditor reviews the risk assessment process, they must verify that it is comprehensive, documented, and that the identified risks are directly linked to potential security breaches or disruptions. The auditor also needs to ensure that the chosen mitigation strategies are proportionate to the identified risks and align with the organization's security objectives and policies. A key aspect is the continuous review and updating of the risk assessment to reflect changes in threats, vulnerabilities, or the supply chain itself. This proactive approach ensures the ongoing effectiveness of the security management system. Question 3. When conducting an internal audit of an organization that has adopted an integrated management system incorporating ISO 28000-2007, ISO 9001-2015, and ISO 14001-2015, what is the primary consideration for an auditor when assessing the effectiveness of documented information related to threat assessment and risk mitigation for the supply chain? Option A. Confirmation that the documented information adheres strictly to the formatting and clause structure of ISO 9001-2015, with security-specific details appended as supplementary information. Option B. Verification that the documented threat assessment process explicitly identifies and addresses security vulnerabilities unique to the supply chain, with mitigation strategies clearly linked to both security objectives and operational quality/environmental controls where applicable. Option C. Evaluation of the number of cross-references between the ISO 28000-2007, ISO 9001-2015, and ISO 14001-2015 documented procedures, irrespective of the substantive content of the risk mitigation. Option D. Assessment of the extent to which the documented information for threat assessment and risk mitigation aligns with general business continuity planning principles, without specific regard to the unique requirements of each individual standard. The correct answer is B. Verification that the documented threat assessment process explicitly identifies and addresses security vulnerabilities unique to the supply chain, with mitigation strategies clearly linked to both security objectives and operational quality/environmental controls where applicable. Explanation. The integration of a supply chain security management system, SCMS, with other established management systems, such as quality management, ISO 9001, and environmental management, ISO 14001, leverages common elements to create a more efficient and effective overall organizational management framework. ISO 28000-2007, like other ISO management system standards, is structured around the Plan-Do-Check Act (PDCA) cycle and incorporates high-level structure (HLS) principles, which facilitate integration. Key integration points include the context of the organization, leadership commitment, risk-based thinking, objective setting, resource management, operational planning and control, performance evaluation and improvement. When auditing an organization that has integrated its SCMS with ISO 9001 and ISO 14001, an internal auditor must assess how the SCMS requirements are being met, considering the specific security risks and controls relevant to the supply chain, while also acknowledging the synergies and potential overlaps with quality and environmental aspects. For instance, a control for ensuring the integrity of goods during transit SCMS might also have implications for product quality, ISO 9001, and packaging waste, ISO 14001. The auditor needs to verify that the integrated system maintains the integrity and effectiveness of each individual management system, while capitalizing on shared processes and documentation. This approach avoids duplication of effort and promotes a holistic view of organizational performance. The most effective integration strategy is one that considers the unique security risks and regulatory requirements applicable to the supply chain, ensuring that these are adequately addressed within the broader management system framework, without compromising the specific objectives of each standard. This includes evaluating the documented information that demonstrates how security policies, objectives, and processes are aligned and integrated with quality and environmental management activities. The auditor's role is to confirm that this integration is not merely superficial, but leads to demonstrable improvements in supply chain security, quality, and environmental performance. Question 4. During an internal audit of a global logistics provider adhering to ISO 28000-2007, an auditor is evaluating the operational planning and control processes for a critical shipment of pharmaceuticals. The company has documented procedures for cargo screening, driver vetting, and route risk assessment. However, the auditor observes during a site visit that the designated secure staging area for this shipment is accessible to unescorted general warehouse personnel, and the pre-shipment security briefing for the driver appears to have been a cursory verbal exchange rather than a formal, documented session. What is the primary implication of these observations for the internal auditor's assessment of the organization's operational planning and control effectiveness concerning this shipment? Option A. The auditor should primarily consider the driver's experience and the general security awareness of warehouse staff, as these qualitative factors often outweigh the need for strict adherence to procedural specifics. Option B. The observed deviations indicate a potential breakdown in the implementation of documented security controls, suggesting that the planned security measures are not being consistently applied in practice, thereby increasing the risk of unauthorized access or tampering. Option C. The auditor should focus on the adequacy of the documented procedures themselves, as the current written controls appear sufficiently robust to manage pharmaceutical shipment security. Option D. The auditor needs to recommend an immediate upgrade of the physical security infrastructure for all staging areas, regardless of the specific shipment's risk profile. The correct answer is B. The observed deviations indicate a potential breakdown in the implementation of documented security controls, suggesting that the planned security measures are not being consistently applied in practice, thereby increasing the risk of unauthorized access or tampering. Explanation. The core principle of operational planning and control within ISO 28000-2007 involves establishing, implementing, and maintaining processes that manage security risks throughout the supply chain. Clause 7.4. Operational planning and control mandates that an organization shall determine, plan, implement, and control the processes that are required to meet requirements for the provision of products and services, and to implement the actions determined as necessary in 7.1. In order to prevent the use of the processes and systems of the organization for the purposes of terrorism and other criminal activities. This includes controlling operations based on criteria established in accordance with the security policy and security objectives. For an internal auditor, assessing the effectiveness of these controls requires evaluating how the organization identifies potential security vulnerabilities in its operational processes, implements preventative measures, and monitors their ongoing efficacy. This involves reviewing documented procedures for risk assessment, security screening of personnel and partners, physical security at critical nodes, and contingency planning for security incidents. The auditor must verify that these controls are integrated into day-to-day operations and are not merely theoretical. For instance, an auditor would check if the procedures for handling high-value or sensitive goods include specific security protocols for loading, transit, and unloading. And if these protocols are consistently followed and documented, the effectiveness of these controls is measured by their ability to prevent unauthorized access, diversion, or tampering, thereby safeguarding the integrity and security of the supply chain. The question focuses on the auditor's role in verifying the implementation and effectiveness of these planned controls, which is a fundamental aspect of an internal audit for ISO 28000-2007. Question 5. When preparing an internal audit report for a multinational logistics firm adhering to ISO 28000-2007, which element is most critical for ensuring the report effectively guides corrective actions and demonstrates compliance with relevant security legislation, such as the SAFE framework of standards or national customs security programs? Option A. A concluding statement that broadly affirms the overall effectiveness of the supply chain security management system without detailing specific areas for improvement. Option B. Detailed evidence of nonconformities, cross-reference to specific ISO 28000, 2007 clauses and applicable regulatory requirements, alongside actionable recommendations for root cause remediation. Option C. A statistical analysis of the frequency of minor nonconformities observed across different operational sites to identify trends. Option D. A comprehensive list of all personnel interviewed during the audit, including their job titles and departments, to provide context for their responses. The correct answer is B. Detailed evidence of nonconformities, cross-reference to specific ISO 28000, 2007 clauses and applicable regulatory requirements, alongside actionable recommendations for root cause remediation. Explanation. An internal auditor's report for ISO 28000-2007 must present findings in a structured and actionable manner. The primary objective is to communicate the conformity or nonconformity of the supply chain security management system with the standards requirements and the organization's own policies. This involves clearly stating the audit scope, objectives, criteria, and methodology. Crucially, the report must detail observed nonconformities, referencing specific clauses of ISO 28000-2007 and any relevant national or international security regulations, e.g., those pertaining to cargo screening, customs compliance, or port security. For each nonconformity, the report should provide objective evidence, such as documented procedures, interview notes, or observational data. It should also include positive observations and opportunities for improvement. The structure typically includes an executive summary, introduction, audit findings, categorized by major/minor nonconformities and observations, conclusions and recommendations. The recommendations should be practical and aimed at addressing the root causes of nonconformities and enhancing the overall security posture. The report serves as a vital tool for management to understand the effectiveness of the implemented security measures and to drive corrective actions. Question 6. During an internal audit of a company's ISO 28000-2007 compliant supply chain security management system, an auditor noted a recurring security incident, repeated unauthorized access attempts to a sensitive logistics database. The initial corrective action implemented was to enforce stricter password complexity rules. Despite this, the attempts persist. What is the most appropriate next step for the internal auditor to recommend to prevent recurrence of this security incident? Option A. Suggest a review of the existing access control matrix to ensure all user permissions are aligned with the principle of least privilege. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis to identify the fundamental reasons behind the persistent unauthorized access attempts, exploring factors beyond the initial corrective action. Option C. Conduct a follow-up audit specifically on the password policy implementation and user training regarding password security protocols. Option D. Recommend the immediate installation of an advanced intrusion detection system to monitor all database access activities. Correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis to identify the fundamental reasons behind the persistent unauthorized access attempts, exploring factors beyond the initial corrective action. Explanation. The scenario describes a situation where an internal auditor for a supply chain security management system, adhering to ISO 28000-2007, identifies a nonconformity. This nonconformity involves a recurring pattern of unauthorized access attempts to a critical logistics database, which were previously addressed by implementing enhanced password complexity requirements. However, the attempts continue, indicating that the initial corrective action did not address the root cause. According to ISO 28000-2007, Clause 8.5.2, concerning corrective actions, organizations must determine the root cause of nonconformities and implement actions to prevent recurrence. When a corrective action proves ineffective, the process must be revisited to identify the underlying systemic issue. This might involve a more thorough investigation into the vulnerabilities, the effectiveness of the implemented controls, and the training provided to personnel. Simply reinforcing existing measures or implementing a similar control without a deeper analysis of why the initial control failed would not be sufficient. Therefore, the most appropriate next step for the internal auditor to recommend, focusing on preventing recurrence, is to conduct a deeper root cause analysis to identify the fundamental reasons for the continued unauthorized access attempts. This analysis should go beyond the immediate technical solution and explore procedural, human, or systemic factors that may have been overlooked. Question 7. An internal auditor is reviewing the effectiveness of preventive actions implemented by Trans World Logistics to mitigate the risk of cargo tampering during international rail transport through regions with documented historical security incidents. The company has identified a potential threat of interdiction and unauthorized removal of high-value components. Which of the following implemented measures would be considered the most effective preventive action, directly addressing the identified risk according to ISO 28000-2007 principles? Option A. Implementing a system for filing and analyzing insurance claims related to cargo loss or damage occurring during transit. Option B. Conducting annual security awareness training for all personnel involved in the supply chain, covering general security best practices. Option C. Deployment of GPS-enabled container seals that trigger immediate alerts to a central security hub upon any detected breach or deviation from the pre-approved transit corridor. Option D. Establishing a post-incident review process to analyze all reported cases of cargo discrepancies and updating standard operating procedures based on findings. The correct answer is C. Deployment of GPS-enabled container seals that trigger immediate alerts to a central security hub upon any detected breach or deviation from the pre-approved transit corridor. Explanation: the core principle of implementing preventive actions in a supply chain security management system, as guided by ISO 28000-2007, is to proactively identify and mitigate potential security risks before they materialize. This involves a systematic process of threat assessment, vulnerability analysis, and the development of controls. When considering a scenario where a logistics company, Global Freight Forwarders, has identified a potential for unauthorized access to sensitive cargo during transit through a specific high-risk region, the internal auditor's role is to verify the effectiveness of implemented preventive measures. The standard emphasizes a risk-based approach, meaning that actions should be proportionate to the identified risks. In this context, a preventive action would be one that aims to stop the threat from occurring or significantly reduce the likelihood of its success. Options that focus on responding to an incident after it has happened, corrective actions, or on general security awareness without specific threat mitigation, are not preventive in nature. Similarly, actions that are purely administrative without a direct impact on preventing unauthorized access would be less effective. The most effective preventive action would directly address the identified vulnerability and threat. For instance, implementing enhanced tracking technology with real-time alerts for deviations from planned routes, coupled with prearranged secure holding points for immediate intervention, directly tackles the risk of unauthorized access during transit in a high-risk zone. This approach aims to prevent the breach from occurring by increasing surveillance and providing a mechanism for rapid response to any suspicious activity, thereby eliminating the potential for the threat to manifest. The focus is on stopping the event before it happens, which is the essence of preventive action. Question 8. An internal auditor is reviewing the implementation of technology to enhance supply chain security for a global distributor of high-value electronics. The organization has deployed radio frequency identification, RFID, tags on individual shipments and pallets to improve visibility and track goods from origin to destination. Considering the principles of ISO 28000-2007, which of the following best describes the primary focus for the auditor when evaluating the effectiveness of this technological control? Option A. Assessing the total cost of ownership and return on investment for the RFID technology implementation compared to alternative tracking solutions. Option B. Evaluating the technical specifications and read range capabilities of the RFID readers and tags to ensure optimal performance in all environmental conditions. Option C. Confirming that the RFID tags are manufactured in facilities that adhere to international labor standards and ethical sourcing practices. Option D. Verifying that the RFID system's deployment directly addresses specific, documented supply chain security risks and vulnerabilities identified in the organization's risk assessment. The correct answer is D. Verifying that the RFID system's deployment directly addresses specific, documented supply chain security risks and vulnerabilities identified in the organization's risk assessment. Explanation: the question probes the auditor's understanding of selecting appropriate technologies for supply chain security, specifically within the context of ISO 28000-2007. The standard emphasizes a risk-based approach to security management. When considering technologies for tracking and tracing goods, an auditor must evaluate their effectiveness in mitigating identified risks, their integration capabilities with existing systems, and their compliance with relevant data protection regulations like GDPR or similar national privacy laws. The scenario describes a company using RFID tags for asset tracking, which is a common technology. However, the core of the auditor's role is to assess if the chosen technology addresses specific security threats and vulnerabilities identified in the risk assessment. The effectiveness of RFID in preventing unauthorized access to sensitive cargo or ensuring the integrity of the supply chain depends on its implementation and how it integrates with other security measures. An auditor would look for evidence that the technology selection was driven by a thorough risk assessment and that it directly contributes to meeting the security objectives outlined in the organization's Supply Chain Security Management System, SCSMS. Therefore, verifying that the technology directly supports the mitigation of identified supply chain security risks, as determined by the risk assessment process, is paramount. This involves checking if the chosen technology, such as RFID, is capable of providing the necessary visibility and control to counter threats like cargo theft, tampering, or diversion, as identified in the organization's risk register. The auditor's role is to confirm that the technology is not merely adopted for its own sake, but serves a defined purpose within the SCSMS framework. Question 9. During an internal audit of a global logistics provider's supply chain security management system, an auditor is tasked with verifying the effective implementation of the organization's security policy. Which of the following actions by the auditor would provide the most robust evidence of the policy's integration into daily operations and adherence by personnel, considering the requirements of ISO 28000-2007 and relevant customs regulations? Option A. Examining the latest internal audit report on the security policy to ascertain if any nonconformities were previously identified and addressed. Option B. Interviewing key personnel from different departments to gauge their general understanding of the security policy's objectives and their perceived role in its execution. Option C. Verifying that the security policy document is readily accessible on the company's intranet and has been formally approved by senior management. Option D. Reviewing a cross-section of training records, incident reports, and risk assessment documentation to confirm that security policy principles are reflected in personnel development, incident handling, and threat mitigation activities. The correct answer is D. Reviewing a cross-section of training records, incident reports, and risk assessment documentation to confirm that security policy principles are reflected in personnel development, incident handling, and threat mitigation activities. Explanation. The core of effective internal auditing for ISO 28000-2007 lies in verifying that the documented management system is not only present but also actively implemented and maintained. Clause 4.2 of ISO 28000-2007, documentation, and Clause 4.4, control of records, are pivotal here. An internal auditor must assess the integrity and accessibility of records. Records are evidence of conformity. When auditing the security policy, an auditor would look for evidence that the policy is communicated, understood, and followed. This evidence is found in various records. For instance, training records demonstrate that personnel are aware of the policy. Incident reports show how security measures, influenced by the policy, are applied and reviewed. Risk assessment records illustrate the process of identifying and evaluating threats that the policy aims to mitigate. Furthermore, the auditor must ensure that these records are legible, identifiable, retrievable, and retained for a specified period, as per the organization's documented procedures and relevant legal or regulatory requirements, such as those concerning the transport of regulated goods or customs declarations. The question focuses on the auditor's responsibility to confirm that the documented policy translates into tangible, verifiable actions, and that these actions are properly recorded. This involves more than just checking for the existence of a policy document. It requires examining the implementation evidence. Therefore, the most comprehensive approach for an auditor to verify the effective implementation of the security policy is to review records that demonstrate its application across different operational areas and personnel. Question 10. An internal auditor conducting a review of a global logistics firm's adherence to ISO 28000-2007 discovers that records of security screening for newly hired warehouse personnel are being retained for only 1 year. The firm operates in multiple jurisdictions, including countries with stringent data privacy laws and regulations that mandate longer retention periods for employment-related documentation to ensure accountability in case of future security breaches or disputes. Considering the principles of ISO 28000-2007 regarding the maintenance of records as evidence of SCSMS effectiveness and compliance, what is the most appropriate finding for the auditor regarding this practice? Option A. The auditor should recommend immediate disposal of all previously retained security screening records older than 1 year to comply with the firm's current documented policy. Option B. The 1-year retention period is adequate as it aligns with the minimum requirements for general business records, and ISO 28000-2007 does not specify exact retention durations. Option C. The retention period for security screening records is insufficient, potentially violating legal and regulatory requirements and failing to provide adequate evidence for long-term SCSMS performance assessment. Option D. The firm's documentation of its record retention policy is the primary focus of the audit, and the specific duration of record retention for security screening is a minor detail not critical to SCSMS conformity. The correct answer is C. The retention period for security screening records is insufficient, potentially violating legal and regulatory requirements and failing to provide adequate evidence for long-term SCSMS performance assessment. Explanation. The core of ISO 28000-2007, particularly concerning documentation and record keeping, emphasizes the need for evidence that the supply chain security management system, SCSMS, is implemented and maintained effectively. Clause 4.4.4, control of documents, and Clause 4.5.4, records are pivotal. Records are defined as information whose availability can be used as evidence of the fulfillment of requirements and of the effective operation of the SCSMS. For an internal auditor, verifying the adequacy of record retention is crucial. This includes ensuring that records are legible, identifiable, retrievable, and protected against damage or loss. The retention period for specific records is often dictated by legal and regulatory requirements, as well as the organization's own needs for demonstrating conformity and managing risks. For example, records pertaining to security screening of personnel, vetting of supply chain partners, incident investigations, and audit findings must be kept for a duration that allows for trend analysis and accountability. A typical retention period might be 3 to 5 years, but this is not a universal rule and depends on the nature of the record and any external mandates. The objective is to have sufficient historical data to prove the system's effectiveness and compliance over time. Therefore, an auditor would look for a documented policy that specifies retention periods aligned with these factors. Question 11. During an internal audit of a multinational logistics firm, it was discovered that a consignment of sensitive medical equipment was misrouted, leading to significant delays and potential spoilage. The immediate cause identified was an incorrect destination code entered into the tracking system. To thoroughly assess the security management system's effectiveness in preventing such occurrences, which approach would an internal auditor most appropriately employ to uncover the underlying systemic causes, aligning with ISO 28000-2007 principles for identifying security vulnerabilities? Option A. Documenting the misrouting incident as an operational error and concluding the audit without further investigation into its systemic implications for security. Option B. Focusing solely on the individual responsible for data entry to determine negligence and implement disciplinary action as the primary corrective measure. Option C. Recommending an immediate upgrade to the tracking software without investigating the operational procedures or training related to its use. Option D. Employing a root cause analysis methodology, such as the 5 whys technique, to trace the sequence of events and identify underlying process, human, or system failures that led to the incorrect data entry. The correct answer is D. Employing a root cause analysis methodology, such as the 5 whys technique, to trace the sequence of events and identify underlying process, human, or system failures that led to the incorrect data entry. Explanation. the core of identifying root causes in supply chain security incidents, as per ISO 28000-2007 principles, involves moving beyond immediate symptoms to uncover underlying systemic failures. A common and effective methodology for this is the 5 whys technique, which involves repeatedly asking why to delve deeper into the causal chain. For instance, if a shipment of high-value electronics was stolen from a distribution center, the immediate cause might be an unlocked loading bay door. Asking why that door was unlocked could reveal that the security guard on duty was distracted by a personal phone call. Further why questions might uncover that the guard had insufficient training on the importance of maintaining vigilance, or that the company's policy on personal device usage during shifts was unclear or not enforced. The root cause might then be identified as a deficiency in the security personnel training program and the absence of a robust policy for managing distractions. This systematic inquiry aims to pinpoint the fundamental reasons that allowed the incident to occur, enabling the implementation of corrective actions that prevent recurrence, such as enhanced training modules, stricter enforcement of policies, and improved supervision. Understanding the interconnectedness of processes, human factors, and policy implementation is crucial for effective root cause analysis in supply chain security management. Question 12. Following an internal audit of a global logistics provider's adherence to ISO 28000-2007, a significant nonconformity was identified concerning the inconsistent application of background checks for personnel with access to high-value cargo. The audit report highlighted that, while some regional depots strictly followed the established vetting procedures, others exhibited considerable laxity, leading to potential security vulnerabilities. As the internal auditor responsible for overseeing the corrective action process, what is the most critical element to ensure in the corrective action plan developed by the logistics provider to effectively address this nonconformity and prevent its recurrence across the entire organization? Option A. A proposal to immediately suspend all personnel in regions with lax application of procedures until a new, standardized procedure is developed and implemented. Option B. A commitment to conduct a one-time retraining session for all depot managers on the importance of supply chain security and the existing background check policy. Option C. A directive to update the ISO 28000-2007 manual to reflect a more flexible interpretation of background check requirements based on regional risk assessments. Option D. A detailed plan for verifying that the root cause of inconsistent application has been eliminated and that all personnel in all regions are now compliant with the background check procedures. The correct answer is D. A detailed plan for verifying that the root cause of inconsistent application has been eliminated and that all personnel in all regions are now compliant with the background check procedures. Explanation. The core principle of developing corrective action plans after identifying nonconformities in a supply chain security management system, as guided by ISO 28000-2007, is to ensure that the root cause of the nonconformity is addressed to prevent recurrence. This involves a systematic process that begins with a thorough investigation to pinpoint the underlying reasons for the deviation from the established security requirements. Once the root cause is identified, the plan must detail specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, smart actions to eliminate that cause. Crucially, the plan must also include mechanism for verifying the effectiveness of these actions. This verification step is paramount to confirm that the implemented corrective actions have indeed resolved the nonconformity and have not introduced new risks or issues. Furthermore, the plan should encompass a review of the entire security management system to determine if similar vulnerabilities exist elsewhere and if broader preventive actions are necessary. The documentation of the nonconformity, the investigation findings, the corrective actions taken, and the verification results forms an integral part of the system's continuous improvement cycle. This systematic approach ensures that the security posture of the supply chain is not only restored, but also enhanced. Question 13. An internal auditor is reviewing the security protocols for the electronic transmission and storage of detailed shipment manifests, which include sensitive commercial data such as cargo value, origin, and consignee details. What is the fundamental security objective that the auditor must prioritize when assessing the controls governing these manifests? Option A. Confirming the accurate and timely physical delivery of any paper-based supporting documentation. Option B. ensuring the information is protected from unauthorized disclosure and unauthorized modification. Option C, recording the precise timestamps of all data access and modification events for historical tracking. Option D, verifying that the shipment manifests are readily available to all designated logistics partners. The correct answer is B, ensuring the information is protected from unauthorized disclosure and unauthorized modification. Explanation: the core principle of ISO 28000-2007 concerning information security within a supply chain is to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of sensitive data. Confidentiality means that information is accessible only to those authorized to have access. Integrity ensures that information is accurate and complete, and has not been modified without authorization. Availability means that authorized users have access to information and associated assets when required. When an internal auditor assesses the effectiveness of controls for protecting shipment manifests, which often contain commercially sensitive details like cargo value, origin, destination, and consignee information, they must evaluate mechanisms that prevent unauthorized disclosure or alteration. Such manifests are critical for operational efficiency and also represent a potential target for corporate espionage or illicit activities if compromised. Controls like access restrictions based on roles, encryption of data at rest and in transit, and secure data disposal policies are fundamental. For instance, if a manifest is transmitted electronically, using secure protocols like SFTP or TLS is paramount for maintaining confidentiality and integrity during transit. Similarly, access to the digital manifest database should be strictly controlled, with audit trails logging who accessed what and when. The question asks about the primary objective when auditing controls for these manifests. The primary objective is not merely to record information, nor is it to ensure the physical security of the paper documents if they exist, although those are related. It is also not solely about the speed of delivery, which is an operational metric. The paramount concern from an information security perspective, as mandated by ISO 28000-2007, is the protection of the information itself from unauthorized access and modification, thereby preserving its trustworthiness and preventing its misuse. This aligns directly with the principles of confidentiality and integrity. Question 14. An internal auditor is reviewing the implementation of ISO 28000-2007 at a global logistics provider. The auditor discovers that while the company has identified key nodes in its transportation network, it has not formally documented the criteria used to determine which specific cargo types and associated transit routes are included within the scope of its supply chain security management system, SCSMS. The auditor also notes that the process for identifying and assessing security risks for these selected elements is inconsistently applied across different operational divisions, which fundamental requirement of ISO 28000-2007 as outlined in Clause 4 is most directly being overlooked in this scenario. Option A, establishing the scope of the SCSMS and identifying all relevant supply chain elements and processes. Option B, defining specific security performance indicators for each supply chain segment. Option C, conducting regular security awareness training for all supply chain personnel. Option D, implementing a documented procedure for responding to security incidents. The correct answer is A, establishing the scope of the SCSMS and identifying all relevant supply chain elements and processes. Explanation: ISO 28000-2007, specifically Clause 4. 1. Mandates that an organization establish, document, implement, maintain, and continually improve a supply chain security management system, SCSMS. This involves defining the scope of the SCSMS and identifying all elements within the supply chain that fall under its purview. The standard requires a systematic approach to understanding the organization's context, including its interactions with other entities in the supply chain, and how these interactions impact security. Furthermore, it emphasizes the need to identify and evaluate security risks associated with all identified supply chain elements and processes. The development of the SCSMS must be based on a thorough understanding of these risks and the organization's commitment to managing them effectively. This foundational step is crucial for ensuring that the subsequent implementation of security measures is relevant and addresses the specific vulnerabilities present. The establishment of the SCSMS is an ongoing process, not a one-time event, and requires continuous review and adaptation to evolving threats and operational changes within the supply chain. Question 15. An internal auditor is reviewing a logistics company's adherence to the World Customs Organization (WCO) SAFE framework. The company has implemented various security protocols for its warehousing and transportation operations. Considering the WCO SAFE framework's emphasis on partnership and risk management, which of the following audit findings would most strongly indicate the company's commitment to the framework's core principles, beyond mere compliance with internal security policies? Option A. The company has established formal agreements with key international suppliers and customers to share security-related information and conduct joint risk assessments, aligning with the SAFE framework's partnership pillar. Option B. The company has developed comprehensive training materials for its employees on the importance of supply chain security awareness. Option C. The company has invested in advanced tracking technology for all its container shipments, providing real-time visibility of cargo movement. Option D. The company has successfully passed its annual internal security audit with no major nonconformities identified in its physical security measures. The correct answer is A. The company has established formal agreements with key international suppliers and customers to share security-related information and conduct joint risk assessments, aligning with the SAFE framework's partnership pillar. Explanation: the World Customs Organization (WCO) SAFE framework of standards to secure and facilitate global trade provides a set of international standards designed to enhance supply chain security and facilitate trade. A key component of SAFE is the Authorized Economic Operator (EO) program, which recognizes businesses that have demonstrated a commitment to supply chain security and compliance with customs regulations. The framework emphasizes a risk-based approach, encouraging collaboration between customs administrations and the private sector. When an internal auditor is assessing an organization's alignment with the WCO SAFE framework, they must evaluate how the organization's security measures and procedures contribute to the overall objectives of the framework. This involves understanding the principles of partnership, information exchange, and the implementation of security standards throughout the supply chain. Specifically, the auditor would look for evidence of the organization's engagement in programs that enhance security, such as implementing validated security measures, participating in trusted trader initiatives, and ensuring that its supply chain partners also adhere to security principles. The core of the SAFE framework is about creating a secure and predictable international trade environment, and an organization's contribution to this is measured by its proactive security management and its role in fostering security throughout its trading relationships. The auditor's role is to verify that the organization's security management system effectively supports these goals, ensuring that security is integrated into business processes and that the organization can demonstrate its commitment to secure trade practices. Question 16. An internal auditor is evaluating the effectiveness of security measures implemented by a global logistics provider that handles sensitive materials across multiple international borders and varying regulatory environments, including compliance with directives like the EU's Import Control System, ICS-2, for air cargo. The provider has deployed a range of controls, from physical access restrictions at warehouses to digital authentication for shipment tracking. What is the most fundamental prerequisite for ensuring that these diverse security measures collectively contribute to the overall security posture and achieve the organization's stated security objectives, as envisioned by ISO 28000-2007? Option A. The regular engagement of external security consultants to provide independent validation of all implemented security controls. Option B. The rigorous training of all personnel involved in the supply chain on the specific operational procedures for each security measure. Option C. The consistent application of advanced technological solutions for all points of potential vulnerability within the supply chain. Option D. A clearly defined and communicated security policy that guides the selection and implementation of all security measures, ensuring alignment with identified risks and organizational goals. The correct answer is D. A clearly defined and communicated security policy that guides the selection and implementation of all security measures, ensuring alignment with identified risks and organizational goals. Explanation: The core principle of ISO 28000-2007 in implementing security measures across a supply chain is the establishment of a robust security management system that is integrated with other management systems and aligned with the organization's overall objectives. This involves a systematic approach to identifying, assessing, and controlling security risks throughout the supply chain lifecycle. Clause 7.2 of ISO 28000-2007, Security Policy, mandates that the organization's security policy must be relevant to the purpose and context of the supply chain security management system and include a commitment to meeting applicable security requirements. Clause 7. Security planning requires the establishment of objectives and processes for achieving them, considering the organization's policy and the need to manage risks. Furthermore, Clause 8.2, hazard identification and risk assessment, is crucial as it details the process for identifying potential security hazards and assessing associated risks. The effectiveness of implemented security measures is then verified through monitoring and measurement, as per Clause 8.3. Therefore, an internal auditor would focus on verifying that the security policy is communicated and understood, that planning addresses identified risks and objectives, and that controls are effectively implemented and monitored. The question asks about the foundational element for ensuring the effectiveness of security measures implemented across a diverse supply chain, which directly relates to the establishment of a comprehensive and integrated security management system that addresses all identified risks and aligns with the overarching security policy and objectives. Question 17. When conducting an internal audit of a supply chain security management system compliant with ISO 28000-2007, what is the primary purpose of meticulously maintaining comprehensive records of all security incidents and their subsequent investigations? Option A. To serve as a historical archive for potential legal proceedings and insurance claims related to security breaches. Option B. Fulfill basic compliance requirements by simply documenting the occurrence of events without further analysis. Option C. To generate performance reports for external regulatory bodies that may not be directly related to the SCSMS itself. Option D. To provide verifiable evidence of the SCSMS operational effectiveness and support continuous improvement efforts through trend analysis. Correct answer is D. To provide verifiable evidence of the SCSMS operational effectiveness and support continuous improvement efforts through trend analysis. Explanation. ISO 28000-2007, specifically Clause 4.5.3, mandates the maintenance of records pertaining to security incidents and investigations. This is crucial for demonstrating conformity, enabling trend analysis, facilitating root cause identification, and supporting continuous improvement of the supply chain security management system, SCSMS. The record should include details such as the nature of the incident, date and time, location, persons involved, actions taken, findings of the investigation, and any corrective or preventive actions implemented. These records serve as evidence during internal and external audits. Furthermore, the analysis of incident data can inform risk assessments and the development of more robust security measures, aligning with the overall objective of enhancing supply chain security and resilience against threats. The effectiveness of an internal audit relies heavily on the thoroughness and accuracy of these documented records. Question 18. Following an internal audit that identified a significant lapse in the physical security of a critical logistics hub, leading to the potential compromise of sensitive cargo, the audit team has recommended a corrective action. This action involves implementing a new tiered access control system and mandatory refresher training for all personnel involved in cargo handling. As an internal auditor tasked with verifying the effectiveness of this corrective action, what is the primary objective of your follow-up assessment? Option A. To gather feedback from personnel on their satisfaction with the new security protocols and training delivery. Option B. To confirm that the root cause of the security lapse has been eliminated and that the implemented measures have prevented recurrence of the issue. Option C. To assess the cost-effectiveness of the new access control system and training program against the initial investment. Option D. To document the immediate compliance of personnel with the new access control procedures during the first week of implementation. The correct answer is B. To confirm that the root cause of the security lapse has been eliminated and that the implemented measures have prevented recurrence of the issue. Explanation. The effectiveness of corrective actions taken to address nonconformities in a supply chain security management system, as per ISO 28000-2007, is determined by verifying that the root cause of the nonconformity has been eliminated and that the implemented corrective action has prevented recurrence. This verification process involves a follow-up audit or review to assess whether the action taken has achieved its intended outcome. The focus is on whether the system now operates as intended and whether the security risk associated with the original nonconformity has been mitigated. This requires evaluating objective evidence that demonstrates the sustained improvement and the absence of the problem. For instance, if a nonconformity related to unauthorized access to a secure facility was identified, the corrective action might involve enhanced access control procedures and training. The effectiveness would then be verified by observing compliance with the new procedures, reviewing access logs for anomalies, and confirming that no further unauthorized access incidents have occurred over a defined period. The goal is to ensure the corrective action has resolved the issue permanently and not just masked it or provided a temporary fix. Question 19. During an internal audit of a global freight forwarding company's supply chain security management system, an auditor observes that while the company's documented security policy mandates a thorough background check for all personnel with access to sensitive cargo, the implemented screening process for newly hired warehouse staff often skips the verification of employment history beyond the immediate previous employer. Additionally, the auditor notes that the company's risk assessment register, which is updated annually, has not incorporated recent intelligence regarding novel methods of cargo diversion prevalent in specific transit regions, despite the company having significant operations in those areas. Which of the following best describes the auditor's findings in relation to ISO 28000-2007 requirements for identifying nonconformities and areas for improvement? Option A. A nonconformity exists due to the inconsistent application of the personnel screening procedure, failing to meet the documented policy, and ISO 28000-2007 Clause 7. 2 requirements, and an area for improvement is the enhancement of the risk assessment process to include emerging threats relevant to operational regions. Option B. A nonconformity is present in the lack of a documented procedure for screening logistics partners, and an area for improvement is the implementation of a more robust employee training program on security protocols. Option C. A nonconformity is identified because the security policy's background check requirement was not fully met, and an area for improvement is the need for more frequent updates to the risk assessment register. Option D. The auditor has identified an area for improvement by suggesting the company conduct more frequent background checks on existing employees, and a nonconformity exists because the risk assessment register is not updated quarterly. The correct answer is A. A nonconformity exists due to the inconsistent application of the personnel screening procedure, failing to meet the documented policy, and ISO 28000-2007 Clause 7. 2 requirements, and an area for improvement is the enhancement of the risk assessment process to include emerging threats relevant to operational regions. Explanation. The core of identifying nonconformities and areas for improvement in an ISO 28000-2007 internal audit lies in the auditor's ability to evaluate the organization's adherence to the standard's requirements against its own documented security policy and objectives, and against established security measures. A nonconformity arises when there is a deviation from the requirements of ISO 28000-2007, the organization's own security management system, SMS, documentation, or applicable legal and regulatory obligations. Areas for improvement are opportunities where the SMS could be enhanced to achieve better security outcomes, even if current practices are technically compliant. Consider the scenario where an audit reveals that while the organization has a documented procedure for screening new logistics partners, the actual implementation checks for specific security certifications, as mandated by the organization's policy, and Clause 7. 2 of ISO 28000-2007 are inconsistently applied by the procurement team. This inconsistency represents a deviation from the established procedure and a potential weakness in the control of third-party risk, which is a critical aspect of supply chain security. Furthermore, the audit might uncover that the risk assessment process, while conducted, does not adequately consider emerging threats identified in recent industry threat intelligence reports, suggesting an opportunity to enhance the comprehensiveness of the risk assessment methodology related to Clause 6. 2. Therefore, the most accurate identification of a nonconformity and an area for improvement would involve pinpointing these specific gaps in documented procedures and their execution, as well as suggesting enhancements to the risk assessment framework to better align with evolving security landscapes and the organization's stated security objectives. This dual focus on current compliance and future enhancement is key to an effective internal audit. Question 20. An internal audit of a multinational logistics firm, certified to ISO 28000-2007, identified a recurring nonconformity related to the inconsistent application of cargo screening procedures at an overseas transshipment point. The firm implemented a corrective action plan involving enhanced training for local personnel and the introduction of a digital checklist for all screening events. During the follow-up audit 6 months later, what specific evidence would most conclusively demonstrate the effectiveness of these corrective actions in preventing recurrence? Option A. Review of randomly selected digital screening checklists from the past 3 months, confirming all required fields were completed and cross-referenced with recorded screening outcomes, alongside a reduction in reported cargo anomalies originating from that point. Option B. A statement from the overseas transshipment point manager confirming that the new procedures are being followed. Option C. Confirmation that the training materials were updated and distributed to the overseas transshipment point personnel. Option D. An updated risk assessment document that lists the improved screening procedures as a control measure for identified threats. Correct answer is A. Review of randomly selected digital screening checklists from the past 3 months, confirming all required fields were completed and cross-referenced with recorded screening outcomes, alongside a reduction in reported cargo anomalies originating from that point. Explanation. The effectiveness of corrective actions is verified by assessing whether the implemented measures have successfully eliminated the root cause of the nonconformity and prevented its recurrence. This involves a follow-up process that includes re-evaluating the original issue, examining the implemented corrective actions for completeness and appropriateness, and then monitoring the system to confirm that the problem has not reappeared. Evidence of this verification can include updated procedures, training records demonstrating comprehension of new processes, internal audit findings that confirm the absence of the original nonconformity, and performance metrics showing a return to or improvement upon desired levels. The focus is on demonstrable change and sustained improvement, not merely the completion of paperwork. For instance, if a security breach occurred due to inadequate access control at a logistics hub, a corrective action might involve upgrading to biometric scanners. Verification would then involve observing the new system in operation, reviewing access logs to confirm proper functioning, and conducting a follow-up audit to ensure no unauthorized access has occurred since the upgrade. This systematic approach ensures that the corrective action has truly resolved the issue and strengthened the supply chain security management system in accordance with ISO 28000-2007 principles. Question 21. An internal audit of a global electronics manufacturer's supply chain security management system, certified to ISO 28000-2007, reveals a recurring nonconformity where incoming shipments from a key overseas component supplier are consistently arriving without the required security seals being properly affixed and documented. The audit report indicates that, while the supplier has the seals, the receiving personnel at the manufacturer's distribution center have not been consistently verifying their integrity or recording their status as per the documented procedure. To develop an effective corrective action plan, what is the most critical initial step an internal auditor should focus on to ensure the plan addresses the underlying issue and prevents recurrence? Option A. Recommending an immediate suspension of shipments from the non-compliant supplier until full compliance is achieved. Option B. Proposing a comprehensive review of the entire ISO 28000-2007 certification to identify systemic weaknesses. Option C. Determining the root cause of the receiving personnel's failure to consistently verify and document the security seals. Option D. Suggesting the implementation of a new, more advanced electronic tracking system for all incoming shipments to bypass manual verification. Correct answer is C. Determining the root cause of the receiving personnel's failure to consistently verify and document the security seals. Explanation. the core of developing a corrective action plan following an internal audit of an ISO 28000-2007 compliant supply chain security management system lies in addressing the root cause of nonconformities. A nonconformity identified during an audit, such as a documented procedure for screening third-party logistics providers, 3PL, not being consistently applied, requires a systematic approach to correction and prevention of recurrence. The first step is to accurately identify the root cause. This involves investigating why the screening procedure was not applied. Possible reasons could include a lack of training for personnel responsible, insufficient clarity in the procedure itself, resource constraints preventing adherence, or a breakdown in the communication of expectations. Once the root cause is established, the corrective action plan must detail specific actions to eliminate that cause. For instance, if the root cause is inadequate training, the corrective action would involve developing and delivering comprehensive training on the 3PL screening procedure, including practical exercises and competency assessments. The plan must also define responsibilities for implementing these actions, establish timelines for completion, and specify methods for verifying the effectiveness of the implemented actions. Verification is crucial to ensure that the nonconformity does not recur. This might involve follow-up audits, review of updated records, or performance monitoring. The plan should also consider potential impacts on other aspects of the supply chain security management system and ensure that the corrective actions do not introduce new risks. This iterative process of identification, root cause analysis, action planning, implementation, and verification is fundamental to maintaining and improving the effectiveness of the supply chain security management system. Question 22. During an internal audit of a global logistics provider specializing in high-value electronics, an auditor is evaluating the effectiveness of the implemented security measures, specifically focusing on the integration of CCTV, access control systems, and intrusion detection systems. The organization's risk assessment has identified unauthorized personnel entry into secure storage areas and theft during transit as primary threats. The auditor needs to determine the most appropriate method to assess the combined efficacy of these technologies in mitigating these identified risks, considering the requirements of ISO 28000-2007. Option A. Conducting a walkthrough of the facility to visually confirm the presence and operational status of all security cameras, card readers, and alarm panels. Option B. Assessing the manufacturer's specifications for each security system to ensure they meet industry standards for performance and reliability. Option C. Reviewing incident reports and correlating them with access logs and CCTV footage from the relevant periods and locations to identify any discrepancies or patterns of compromise. Option D. Verifying that each system, CCTV, access control, and intrusion detection, has a documented maintenance schedule and that maintenance records are up to date. The correct answer is C. Reviewing incident reports and correlating them with access logs and CCTV footage from the relevant periods and locations to identify any discrepancies or patterns of compromise. Explanation. The effectiveness of a supply chain security program is often evaluated through a combination of physical and technological controls. ISO 28000-2007 emphasizes the integration of various security measures to create a robust system. When assessing the efficacy of CCTV, access control, and intrusion detection systems as part of an internal audit for a chemical manufacturer, an auditor must consider how these systems collectively contribute to mitigating identified risks within the supply chain. Specifically, the audit should verify that these systems are not only operational, but also aligned with the organization's security policy and risk assessment. The integration of these systems allows for a layered defense. CCTV provides visual verification and deterrence. Access control restricts unauthorized entry to critical areas, and intrusion detection systems alert personnel to breaches. A key aspect of the audit is to determine if the data generated by these systems is correlated and used for continuous improvement, as mandated by the standard. For instance, reviewing access logs in conjunction with CCTV footage from a specific zone can reveal anomalies or confirm the validity of access events. Similarly, correlating intrusion alerts with CCTV recordings helps in assessing the system's sensitivity and the effectiveness of the response. The question probes the auditor's ability to assess the synergistic effect of these technologies in achieving the overall security objectives of the supply chain, rather than evaluating each system in isolation. This holistic approach ensures that the security controls are not just present, but are actively contributing to the security posture and are appropriately managed and maintained according to the standards requirements, which includes regular testing and review. The correct answer focuses on the integrated effectiveness and evidence-based validation of these controls within the context of the organization's security framework. Question 23. When conducting an internal audit of a multinational logistics firm's adherence to ISO 28000-2007, an auditor is evaluating the effectiveness of communication protocols for supply chain security. The firm utilizes a complex network of third-party carriers, customs brokers, and warehouse operators across multiple jurisdictions, each with varying local regulations and security standards. The auditor discovers that while security alerts and policy updates are disseminated via email to all direct employees, there is no standardized method to ensure these communications reach and are understood by personnel at partner organizations. Nor is there a formal feedback mechanism from these external entities. What is the most critical deficiency in the firm's communication strategy concerning its supply chain security management system as per ISO 28000-2007? Option A. Failure to establish a verifiable process for ensuring that security-related communications reach and are acknowledged by all relevant external supply chain partners, and a lack of a structured feedback loop from these partners. Option B. Inadequate frequency of email dispatches for security alerts, which may lead to outdated information being circulated among internal staff. Option C. The absence of a dedicated mobile application for real-time security updates, which is a common practice in some advanced logistics operations. Option D. Over-reliance on email as the sole communication channel for internal staff, neglecting other potential methods like intranet postings or team meetings. The correct answer is A. Failure to establish a verifiable process for ensuring that security-related communications reach and are acknowledged by all relevant external supply chain partners, and a lack of a structured feedback loop from these partners. Explanation: the internal auditor's role in assessing the effectiveness of communication channels for supply chain security matters is paramount. ISO 28000-2007, specifically Clause 5.3 on communication, mandates that an organization shall ensure that relevant security information is communicated within the organization, and where appropriate, with interested parties. For an internal auditor, verifying the effectiveness of these communication pathways involves examining not just the existence of documented procedures, but also the practical implementation and feedback mechanisms. This includes understanding how security policies, threat intelligence, incident reports, and changes to security protocols are disseminated to all relevant personnel across the supply chain, from procurement and logistics to warehousing and final delivery. Furthermore, the auditor must ascertain that there are established channels for employees and partners to report security concerns or suggest improvements without fear of reprisal. The effectiveness is measured by the clarity, timeliness, and comprehensiveness of the information shared, as well as the organization's ability to receive and act upon feedback. A key aspect is ensuring that communication flows both vertically, e.g., management to staff, and horizontally, e.g., between different departments or entities within the supply chain. The auditor's assessment should confirm that the communication strategy aligns with the organization's security objectives and risk appetite, and that it supports the continuous improvement of the supply chain security management system. The auditor must also consider regulatory requirements, such as those pertaining to the reporting of certain types of security incidents or breaches, and ensure these are integrated into the communication framework. Question 24. When auditing the documented framework of a new supply chain security management system, SCSMS, for a global logistics provider, the internal auditor discovers that while the core security policies and risk assessment methodologies are clearly defined, the detailed procedures for implementing specific security controls at various points in the international supply chain are only broadly outlined. These procedures lack specific action steps, responsible parties for each step, and verifiable metrics for control effectiveness. Considering the requirements for establishing and documenting an SCSMS under ISO 28000-2007, which aspect of the documentation is most critically deficient, potentially hindering effective implementation and ongoing maintenance. Option A. The documented management review process lacks a clear schedule for its execution and the identification of required inputs. Option B. The scope of the SCSMS has not been explicitly defined to cover all international transit routes utilized by the organization. Option C. The absence of a formal risk acceptance process for identified supply chain security threats that are deemed unmitigable. Option D. Insufficient detail in the documented procedures for implementing security controls, lacking specific action steps, assigned responsibilities, and measurable effectiveness indicators. The correct answer is D. Insufficient detail in the documented procedures for implementing security controls, lacking specific action steps, assigned responsibilities, and measurable effectiveness indicators. Explanation: the establishment of a supply chain security management system, SCSMS, as per ISO 28000-2007, involves a structured approach to define, document, implement, and maintain the system. Clause 4.2 of ISO 28000-2007, titled Establishment of the SCSMS, outlines the fundamental requirements. This clause emphasizes the need for the organization to establish, document, implement, and maintain an SCSMS and continually improve its effectiveness in accordance with the standard's requirements. The documentation aspect is crucial for providing a clear framework, outlining policies, objectives, processes, and procedures related to supply chain security. This includes defining the scope of the SCSMS, identifying security risks and vulnerabilities, establishing security control, and specifying roles and responsibilities. The implementation phase involves putting these documented elements into practice across the supply chain. Maintaining the SCSMS ensures that it remains relevant and effective over time through monitoring, review, and corrective actions. The effectiveness of the SCSMS is directly linked to its ability to manage security risks and achieve the organization's security objectives. Therefore, a comprehensive and well-documented SCSMS is a prerequisite for its successful implementation and ongoing maintenance, forming the bedrock of the entire system's integrity and compliance. Question 25. During an internal audit of a multinational logistics firm adhering to ISO 28000-2007, an auditor is examining the effectiveness of the company's proactive measures to prevent unauthorized access to high-value cargo during transit. The firm utilizes GPS tracking, sealed containers with tamper-evident seals, and employs vetted third-party carriers. Recent intelligence suggests the potential for sophisticated interdiction, attempts targeting specific routes. Considering the principles of supply chain security management and the need for robust preventive actions, which of the following audit findings would indicate the most comprehensive and effective implementation of preventive measures against this specific threat? Option A. Evidence of a documented procedure for dynamic route risk assessment and contingency planning, including prearranged communication protocols with law enforcement and secure staging areas, triggered by specific threat intelligence updates. Option B. Confirmation that all GPS tracking devices have been recently calibrated and that tamper-evident seals meet industry standards for visual integrity checks. Option C. Records showing that all third-party carriers have undergone a one-time background check of their primary drivers involved in high-value cargo transport. Option D. A review of the company's security policy, which broadly states a commitment to preventing unauthorized access to cargo during transit. The correct answer is A. Evidence of a documented procedure for dynamic route risk assessment and contingency planning, including prearranged communication protocols with law enforcement and secure staging areas, triggered by specific threat intelligence updates. Explanation: the core of implementing preventive actions in supply chain security, as guided by ISO 28000-2007, lies in proactively identifying and mitigating potential vulnerabilities before they can manifest as security incidents. This involves a systematic approach that moves beyond reactive measures. The standard emphasizes understanding the context of the organization, including its supply chain operations, the regulatory environment, such as the SAFE framework of standards or national customs security initiatives, and the specific threats it faces. Preventive actions are derived from risk assessments, which should consider the likelihood and impact of various security threats, including theft, diversion, tampering, and unauthorized access. When an internal auditor reviews the effectiveness of preventive actions, They are looking for evidence that the organization has established processes to anticipate and neutralize these threats. This includes measures like enhanced cargo screening, secure transportation routes, personnel vetting, and robust information security protocols. The focus is on embedding security consciousness into all stages of the supply chain lifecycle, from procurement and manufacturing to logistics and delivery. The most effective preventive actions are those that are integrated into the operational design and not merely add-ons. They should be documented, communicated, and regularly reviewed for efficacy. The auditor's role is to verify that these actions are not only in place, but are also functioning as intended to reduce the residual risk to an acceptable level, aligning with the organization's security policy and objectives. Question 26. When conducting an internal audit of a logistics hub's physical security framework, which of the following measures most directly addresses the primary objective of preventing unauthorized ingress into the facility's operational areas, aligning with the principles of ISO 28000-2007? Option A. Deployment of advanced video surveillance across all internal transit routes and storage zones. Option B. Establishment of a comprehensive background check program for all newly hired personnel. Option C. Regular review and updating of emergency response protocols for security breaches. Option D. Implementation of a multi-layered perimeter intrusion detection system coupled with controlled access points for all vehicle and personnel entry. Correct answer is D. Implementation of a multi-layered perimeter intrusion detection system coupled with controlled access points for all vehicle and personnel entry. Explanation. The core of effective physical security within a supply chain, as guided by ISO 28000-2007, involves a layered approach that addresses various vulnerabilities. When considering the primary objective of deterring unauthorized access and safeguarding assets, the focus shifts to proactive measures. Perimeter security, such as robust fencing, lighting, and intrusion detection systems, establishes the first line of defense. Beyond the perimeter, access control points, including guarded entryways, vehicle inspection areas, and credential verification, are crucial for managing who and what enters secure zones. Internal security measures, such as CCTV surveillance, internal patrols, and secure storage areas, further reinforce protection. The effectiveness of these measures is not solely in their presence, but in their integration and the operational procedures that govern their use. For instance, regular maintenance of fences, testing of alarm systems, and ongoing training for security personnel are vital to ensure these controls remain effective. The concept of defense in depth, where multiple layers of security are implemented, ensures that if one measure fails, others are in place to mitigate the risk. This holistic view, encompassing physical barriers, technological solutions, and human oversight, is fundamental to achieving supply chain security. The question probes the most fundamental aspect of physical security within this context, which is the initial prevention of unauthorized ingress. Question 27. An internal auditor for a global logistics provider is reviewing the company's adherence to ISO 28000-2007. The auditor identifies that, while security procedures are documented, the records pertaining to specific instances of cargo screening, including the date, time, screening method used, and the outcome, are retained indefinitely without any defined archival or disposal policy. This practice directly impacts the ability to demonstrate consistent application of security measures and to conduct trend analysis for future risk mitigation. Which aspect of documentation and record control, as stipulated by ISO 28000-2007, is most critically compromised by this indefinite retention of operational security records? Option A. The control of records, specifically regarding their identification, storage, protection, retrieval, retention time, and disposition. Option B. The establishment of a comprehensive security policy that clearly outlines all security procedures and responsibilities. Option C. The requirement for management review to ensure the ongoing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the SCSMS. Option D. The process for internal communication regarding security updates and the dissemination of relevant documented information. The correct answer is A. The control of records, specifically regarding their identification, storage, protection, retrieval, retention time, and disposition. Explanation. The core principle of ISO 28000-2007 concerning documentation and record keeping is to ensure that the Supply Chain Security Management System, SCSMS, is effectively established, implemented, maintained, and continually improved. This requires documented information that is specific to the organization's context, its supply chain risks, and the requirements of the standard. Clause 4.2. 1 of ISO 28000-2007 mandates the establishment, implementation, and maintenance of an SCSMS, which inherently necessitates comprehensive documentation. Specifically, Clause 4.2.3 addresses control of documents, and Clause 4.2.4 addresses control of records. Records are a subset of documented information, specifically those that provide evidence of activities performed and results achieved. The standard requires that records be established and maintained to provide evidence of conformity to requirements and effective operation of the SCSMS. This includes records related to risk assessments, security plans, training, audits, corrective actions, and management reviews. The retention period for these records should be determined based on legal and regulatory requirements, as well as the organization's own needs for demonstrating conformity and managing its SCSMS. Therefore, an internal auditor assessing compliance would look for evidence that all necessary documented information, including records, is controlled, maintained, and readily available to demonstrate the system's effectiveness and adherence to the standard's requirements. The absence of a defined retention period for specific security-related operational records, such as incident reports or access logs, would represent a deficiency in the control of records, as it impacts the ability to demonstrate ongoing compliance and to analyze trends for improvement. Question 28. An internal audit of a global logistics provider, adhering to ISO 28000-2007 principles, identified a recurring pattern of minor cargo diversions at intermediate transit hubs. While immediate responses focused on disciplinary actions for personnel involved in the latest diversion, the auditor is tasked with identifying the underlying systemic issues that enable these events. Which of the following represents the most likely root cause that an internal auditor should investigate to address this recurring problem effectively? Option A. Inadequate oversight and verification mechanisms within the transit hub's inventory management system, failing to reconcile physical stock with digital records promptly and accurately. Option B. A recent increase in fuel surcharges impacting the overall profitability of the logistics provider, indirectly affecting resource allocation. Option C. The absence of specific encryption protocols for digital manifests transmitted between the origin and the transit hub. Option D. The specific shift schedule of security personnel, leading to potential fatigue and reduced vigilance during overnight operations. The correct answer is A. Inadequate oversight and verification mechanisms within the transit hub's inventory management system, failing to reconcile physical stock with digital records promptly and accurately. Explanation: the fundamental principle of root cause analysis in supply chain security management, as guided by standards like ISO 28000, involves moving beyond immediate triggers to identify the underlying systemic or procedural deficiencies that permitted an incident to occur. This requires a structured approach that examines the entire chain of events and the contributing factors. For instance, a breach in cargo integrity at a transshipment point might initially appear to be caused by a specific security guard's negligence. However, a deeper analysis, following the principles of ISO 28000, would investigate the effectiveness of the guard's training, the adequacy of supervision, the clarity of the security protocols for that specific operation, the physical security measures in place at the transshipment point, and the overall risk assessment that informed the security plan for that segment of the supply chain. Identifying the root cause means uncovering the fundamental reason why the guard's negligence, or any other immediate cause, was possible and had such a significant impact. This often points to issues in management systems, such as insufficient resource allocation for training, poorly defined responsibilities, lack of regular audits of security procedures, or inadequate communication channels regarding evolving threats. The goal is to implement corrective actions that prevent recurrence by addressing these foundational weaknesses, rather than merely treating the symptoms of the incident. This systematic investigation aligns with the continuous improvement ethos embedded in management system standards. Question 29. During an internal audit of a logistics provider's supply chain security management system, an auditor is assessing the effectiveness of controls for verifying the integrity of high-value electronic components during transit. The documented procedure requires that each container be sealed with a unique, serialized, tamper-evident seal, and that the seal number be recorded in the shipment manifest and cross-referenced with the bill of lading. The auditor observes several containers awaiting dispatch, but notes that one container has a seal that appears to be of a generic, non-tamper-evident type. What is the most appropriate approach for the auditor to gather objective evidence regarding the integrity of this specific shipment and the adherence to the sealing procedure? Option A. Rely solely on the driver's verbal assurance that the seal was correctly applied and that the shipment's integrity is maintained as per standard operating procedures. Option B. Immediately stop the shipment from leaving the facility and escalate the issue to senior management, demanding an explanation for the non-compliant seal. Option C. Request to inspect the original bill of lading and the shipment manifest for the container in question to verify the recorded seal number and compare it against the seal currently affixed, and interview the dispatch personnel responsible for applying the seal to understand the deviation. Option D. Document the observation of the non-compliant seal and proceed to audit other areas, assuming the issue is isolated and will be addressed in a subsequent management review. The correct answer is C. Request to inspect the original bill of lading and the shipment manifest for the container in question to verify the recorded seal number and compare it against the seal currently affixed, and interview the dispatch personnel responsible for applying the seal to understand the deviation. Explanation. When conducting an internal audit of a supply chain security management system based on ISO 28000-2007, an auditor's primary objective is to gather objective evidence to verify the effectiveness of implemented controls and adherence to the standard. Objective evidence is factual information that can be proven to be true based on observation, measurement, or documented records. It is essential for forming sound audit conclusions. The auditor must employ various techniques to collect this evidence. Reviewing documented procedures and records provides a baseline of intended operations and past performance. Interviews with personnel help understand their awareness, implementation of procedures, and any challenges encountered. Direct observation of processes, such as cargo handling, access control, or screening procedures, allows the auditor to see how controls are applied in practice. Furthermore, comparing the actual implementation against the documented system and relevant regulatory requirements, like those pertaining to customs declarations or transportation of sensitive goods, is crucial. For instance, if a procedure states that all high-value shipments must be sealed with tamper-evident seals, the auditor would seek evidence such as inspecting the seals on current shipments, reviewing seal logs for completeness and accuracy, and interviewing warehouse staff about the sealing process. The absence of any of these evidence types would weaken the audit finding. The goal is to triangulate information from multiple sources to ensure the validity of the audit findings. Question 30. When preparing a comprehensive internal audit report for a supply chain security management system certified to ISO 28000-2007, what is the most critical element to ensure the report effectively drives corrective action and continuous improvement, considering the potential impact of regulatory compliance frameworks such as the Maritime Transportation Security Act, MSA, or equivalent national legislation? Option A. Focusing primarily on listing all documented procedures and controls that were found to be in place, irrespective of their actual effectiveness or alignment with identified risks. Option B. Clearly articulating actionable recommendations that directly address the root causes of identified nonconformities, supported by specific evidence and linked to relevant ISO 28000-2007 clauses and applicable regulatory requirements. Option C. Providing a detailed historical overview of previous audit findings and their resolution status to contextualize the current audit's outcomes. Option D. Including a subjective assessment of the auditee's overall commitment to supply chain security based on informal observations during the audit process. The correct answer is B. Clearly articulating actionable recommendations that directly address the root causes of identified nonconformities, supported by specific evidence, and linked to relevant ISO 28000-2007 clauses and applicable regulatory requirements. Explanation. The audit report is the formal output of an internal audit process, summarizing findings and providing recommendations for improvement. For an ISO 28000-2007 audit, the report must be objective, factual, and comprehensive, reflecting the audit scope and objectives. It should detail the audit methodology, the criteria against which the supply chain security management system was evaluated, e.g. ISO 28000, 2007 clauses, company policies, relevant legislation like the Safe Port Partnership Act or the CTPAT framework. The audit team's observations identified nonconformities, major and minor, areas of good practice, and specific, actionable recommendations for corrective actions. The report structure typically includes an executive summary, scope and objectives, audit criteria, methodology, findings, including evidence and conclusions, and recommendations. The level of detail in reporting nonconformities is crucial, requiring clear statements of the deviation from the standard or documented procedures, supported by objective evidence. Recommendations should be practical and aimed at addressing the root causes of nonconformities and enhancing the overall effectiveness of the supply chain security management system. The report serves as a communication tool for management and stakeholders, facilitating decision-making regarding corrective actions and continuous improvement. It is vital that the report accurately reflects the audit's findings without introducing subjective interpretations or unverified claims, ensuring its credibility and utility in driving positive change within the organization's supply chain security practices.